Hello, and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Rich Hosford. This month we are taking a deep look into the state of Burlington school buildings. This includes the age of the buildings, what maintenance work needs to be done, and what can be improved to help foster student learning. We'll also take a look at how growth in student population might impact class size and overall crowding. We'll start the discussion with two top school department officials who have thought long and hard about these issues. Let's take a look. I'm now joined by Superintendent Eric Conti and Director of Operations Bob Kuna. Talk more about the school facilities and buildings. Thanks for joining me, gentlemen.
Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
So just a big overview. What are some of the current needs that you're seeing as far as buildings and facilities go in the district?
Again, I'm going to defer to Bob for some of these. So,
yeah, absolutely.
The expert.
So current needs in the building, we're working on a boiler system which we got funded through town meeting. So that's at the middle school. We're looking at a new fire alarm system for the Francis Wyman Elementary School. We're also looking at putting air conditioning in the elementary school as well, too.
Yeah.
So Bob looks at this in a very granular way, which is important. So I guess I'm looking at it from, we essentially have 6 schools in Burlington that are currently in use. We have 3, Francis Wyman Memorial in the middle school, that have been built relatively recently. Obviously, the Francis Wyman, I think, was renovated in the 90s, but I'm saying I still think that would be one of our newer schools. And we have 3 schools, Pine Glen, Fox Hill, and the high school, that were built, again, in the late 60s and the 70s. I think this school opened in 71 or 72. So we have to do work, significant work, on the 3 schools that were from the 60s or the 70s. And it's not that the teaching isn't up to date or best practice. Again, our teachers are outstanding. So the programs that are happening in the buildings, I think, are top notch. It's just the buildings are starting to, I think, get in the way of the teaching, and we have to make some changes. And then the systems that are part of the buildings are also reaching the end of their useful lives. So I think those are the bigger projects from my perspective, and we're constantly and grateful for the support of town meeting to be able to maintain the facilities that we have, because we have to continue to use them, obviously, and they need to, stay functional. Roofs don't need to leak, boilers need to work, that kind of thing. But I'd say it's those 3 schools, again, Pine Glen, Fox Hill, and the high school, that just by age alone need to be considered for renovation or replacement.
Now, I know one of the big issues that comes up each year with an application to the state is the high school boiler system. Just talk about that process, that's been ongoing of trying to get some funds from the name of the state agency is slipping my mind, but I'm sure you have it.
The state agency is called the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and we have put in 7 statements of interest, which is SOI. We should know approximately December this year if our statement of interest for this year has been accepted. So that process means that we fill out an application for the state, and there's two systems. One's called accelerated repair, and one's called core. Core means we have a large process or a new building that we want to do, and accelerated repair we don't technically qualify for, like if a roof caved in or something like that, and that's not where our project is. So our project really is that we maintain our buildings great, but they are showing signs of age. So like I said, we don't fall into the accelerated repair. The core program, we're looking at doing everything from a new boiler system, HVAC system. We're looking at new lockers, renovating science classrooms, really updating the facility of the way that it is right now. So again, hopefully we'll know in December where we're at with that process.
Excellent. And what kind of level of funding are you looking for?
Well, you never really know with the MSBA. So if we look at our past partnerships with them, that would be in the Memorial School and the middle school. The final funding agreement, again, was I think a few points over 50%, or roughly about half. So the state essentially picked up half the tab, and the town picked up half the tab. So we would hope that that would be the model we would look at, moving forward. But you're going to say half a tab of what, right?
Right.
So that really depends on the extent of the renovation, and I'd say it's going to be expensive, but far less expensive than building a new high school. So construction prices in the last 5 or 6 years have really skyrocketed. So I know Arlington is in the process, and their first preliminary bids came in, and that's going to be a bit of a larger high school maybe than we would talk about. But again, the new high school for them was roughly around $300 million. Bill Ricca just opened, I think, a new school for $188 million.
Wow.
So new high schools are expensive, obviously. But renovating this whole facility, again, would be, I'm hoping we could do it, for $75 million and get another 40 to 50 years out of it.
Right.
And again, I have no grounding for that number, so I'm just sort of guesstimating. But if we were to take on a lot of the things that need fixing, repairing, including the science labs, the HVAC systems, and sort of some aesthetic things that need to be upgraded, floors, walls, ceilings, that type of thing. This is a 360,000 square foot building, roughly. So, I mean, it's big.
Yeah.
And so, those costs add up quickly. So I think that's what we're looking at, and that's what we've submitted to the MSBA for their consideration. They've been out to visit twice in the last 4 or 5 years. They've said our application reflects what our needs are, so no one's trying to, gild the lily or make the problem bigger than it is. I think they liked our application. I think they've all said that the need exists. But honestly, the MSBA as a state agency has just run out of money. They exist on 1 cent of the sales tax is how they're funded. And they have a list of priorities, and they work through that list. And we've just fallen off the list every year in terms of there have been schools that have, from their evaluation rubric, have sort of placed higher than we have on their list.
Yeah, you're competing against potentially 304 other communities in the state, so a lot of people putting in applications, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I understand that there's a bill in the works at the state level to possibly add more money to the MSB.
Yes. So I think the MSBA is funded by the 1 cent on the sales tax, and I think that they've limited the projects of that were funded every year to around $600 million. In the Student Opportunity Act, which is the new joint bill that was just approved by the Senate last week and now is being considered by the House, they would increase that annual commitment from $600 to $750 million. So I believe there's $150 million that their state is going to make potentially available, again, depending on the resources from the sales tax, for new construction projects. So whether that $150 million allows Burlington to fit underneath, whether we would fit underneath the initial $600 million, again, we have yet to see. We'll find out in December. I do think it's important to mention, though, that we don't get credit for the number of times that we've applied. So every year is a fresh application.
It's like starting over.
So Bob and I are saying, we've applied 7 times, but from the MSBA's perspective, this year's statement of interest is this year's statement of interest.
Okay.
Again, our need hasn't gone away, and we're going to continue to apply. But I'm saying, I think they're not saying, "Oh, it's Burlington's turn," because they've been patient. No one's saying that.
Okay, doesn't work that way.
No.
One of the things, that gets brought up a lot especially with a lot of new apartment complexes coming, online in town is, future population. Are you seeing any potential rise or space needs kind of looming?
It's a hard question to answer because
Yeah.
I think there's potential for that. And what we've seen, I think, are some early sort of canaries in the coal mine that may be coming.
Okay.
We've done a 10-year enrollment projection, and there are projections that our enrollment is going to increase by 10% over the next 10 years. So that's 340, 350 students, which would have an impact on us because we're limited by the number of classrooms that we sort of currently have, especially at the elementary level. But the more immediate impact, and I'll let Bob address the transportation sort of immediate impact, and then I can maybe talk about a little about the student diversity that we're seeing, which is really a strength. So with transportation, Bob, you're seeing.
Yeah, so really what we're seeing throughout the town of Burlington, and which is a fortunate situation to be in, is that there's a lot of construction happening. So we're seeing small houses being torn down, larger houses being built. We're seeing a lot more apartment complexes being built throughout the town. And typically Burlington usually has our residential on one side of the town. We're seeing that residential population now disperse further throughout the town, which is now causing us slight delays in our transportation, right? The buses that used to be in these smaller neighborhoods now are branching out to further parts of the town to pick children up, which again is taking longer. And again, we do see traffic in, there's nothing new, seeing the cars in Burlington. But again, going across the town with some new construction delays and things like that definitely becomes a burden for us, getting kids back and forth to school daily.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, the spreading out further.
Right. So again, if we initially on one of these developments we have 3 students, that's not going to impact our overall delivery of services for 3 students. But if we have to send a bus to a part of town to pick up 3 students that it takes 10 minutes to get there,
Right.
And we have the same number of buses and we never had to get to that part of town before, then there's a cascade effect. So that sort of causes delays through the whole process. So Bob's working with the bus company. We're trying to get creative. There may be options in the future where we use some smaller vans instead of buses, but then there's safety issue. I mean, it gets complex pretty quickly, but it may be that we need more buses than we have now just because we have parts of town that we're covering that we never had to cover before. So overall, again, our enrollment this year is not very different from last year, so I think we're holding steady, but the students that are comprising that enrollment, they seem to be changing every year. So we've added students whose primary language is not English. That's been a growing population for us.
Right.
Those are students that we have to provide support in order to access the curriculum. We have to screen all of our students whose language spoken at home is not English, and that doesn't mean that every one of those students receive services because their English could be very proficient or better than mine. So we wouldn't need to provide them services, but we're screening about 50% of our students at Francis Wyman, our kindergartners, and 50% of our students at Memorial, and the other elementary schools are not far behind. So about half of our student population we're screening for language support, and the reason I'm saying kindergartner, those are the students who are new to us, who we don't really know. So we also have students moving in throughout the age groups, and I think we have to collect this information, so I think the latest for this year, there were 56 languages spoken at Burlington High School, other than English. So we're a very diverse community, which is a strength from my perspective, because our students are going to experience that global community no matter where they live, and they get to experience it here while they're in Burlington. And so I think it's a really good thing, but programmatically we have to make sure that we're supporting kids as they, as they need support. Again, not a real building question, but I'm just saying, we're going to see population. Again, we are projecting enrollment growth, which will see the need for more physical classroom space, but we're also seeing the services that we need to provide students also requiring space, even if our enrollment stays steady. We're seeing we need to create more programming to meet the needs of even the same number of kids, which also requires more space.
So we had talked about, obviously space needs and things like, the HVAC systems, sort of the stuff that kind of keeps the building functioning. Are there things that you'd like to see as far as, that, changes in the buildings that relate more directly to education, like different labs, different types of, facilities that would allow different programming?
Right. So given the choice, I take a talented teacher over a modern building any day of the week, right? So you say the highest number of Nobel Prizes are from Bronx Science. It's probably an old 1900, school building, whatever. So we are a people-driven sort of organization in terms of performance, and we have effective teachers. What you don't want to see is the building starting to get in the way of their teaching, and I think that's happening at the high school, especially in areas of science. So again, we need to upgrade just so our facility matches the talented teacher that we have. That's one aspect of it. Then to even take it a step further, I think when this is done really well, the building becomes a part of the educational program that we're offering kids. So the building it doesn't just become a space to house kids, it becomes a learning space in itself. So if the Memorial School, for instance, we have gray water systems for flushing the toilets and doing some other things. But the students are studying ecology, learning about water conservation, they can actually study the building that they're in. We have solar arrays on this building, right? If our students are studying alternative energy sources, they can use this building as an example for studying those things. Air quality, water quality, climate change, all those issues that I think our students are very interested in. We'd love to see our buildings reflect the opportunity for students to study those in the spaces where they're learning. So, and I know Bob has that perspective on a very granular level in terms of the cleaners that we're choosing, in terms of the light bulbs and the lighting that we're choosing, and sort of the upgrades that we're making. We're really trying to modernize all of those functions within buildings that are relatively old, that didn't have the same, the environmental context wasn't the same in the 60s as it is now. And the more we can involve students in those decisions, or again, involve the building in their learning, I think they'll be more compelled and more engaged, more empowered in the building itself. And so I know that's a little weird, but I'm just saying, I just want the building not just to be a box. The building needs to, it works best for me if the building is part of our curriculum.
Yeah, something that you can actually, a little bit more of a dynamic environment that you can base off of. So I think we kind of hit most of the big questions that I had. So I guess the last one I'll just end with is, the hypothetical that everyone likes to throw out nowadays. If money was no issue, what would you like to see happen?
You can go first, because I'll get in trouble for it.
Oh, again, if money was no issue, I definitely would like to see a renovation here at the high school completed. I would like to look at least one, if not two, of our elementary school buildings, which would be Pine Glen and Fox Hill, in no particular order. The other thing that we need to consider as well, too, is that the high school track and the middle school track are a few years old. So we're going to have to look at either upgrading or not fully replacing, but refinishing those at some point. And I would definitely like to consider a new snack shack / team house for the varsity field as well. So that would probably be my short-term, immediate wish list.
Excellent. Anything different?
Well, no, I won't change that. I think it's the three buildings that we have that are sort of from the 60s that I think have been maintained very well, and I do want to make sure we take the opportunity to thank our custodial staff, our maintenance staff.
Absolutely.
I do think they do a great job, again, keeping our buildings. When we're being critical of our buildings, it's not due to their efforts. I mean, things are clean. The MSBA comments every time they come out how well our buildings are taken care of, and the community has really allowed us to do that by having free cash dedicated towards project upgrades every year.
Right.
But again, I think of things maybe in too big a picture, but we have about 1 million square feet under a roof, and we have kids from age 3 to 18, 3,600 kids utilizing that space, and I would sort of challenge anyone to have that many kids come through any sort of physical space that exists without things getting worn out, broken, and even in an appropriate way. So I'm saying, these aren't museums. We want kids to be here and be present and be learning, but there's just always a lot to do. And I think our Bob's done a great job. I think our custodial and maintenance staff does a great job. But it's time for us to make sure that our buildings, especially the three that we discussed, reflect the quality of teaching and teachers that are teaching inside of them, and not have the building being a limiting factor in the curriculum that we deliver. And so I think that's what we're looking at, and hopefully high school project will be supported, and then we can move forward, because that's probably about a 5 or 6 year scripted process from that point. So nothing we say here, Rich, is immediate either, right?
Of course.
And then if we get into then in elementary school, we're still talking about 5 or 6 years out. So, people are saying, boy, you're doing a 10-year projection. Why that far out? Is all of these conversations, they're generational in nature, in terms of making sure that even if we're in the process with MSBA, there's a multi-year process that goes with that. So, and time goes pretty quickly, right? The middle school, we think Memorial is a new school.
Yeah,
and how old's Memorial now?
2012.
Yeah.
So it goes quickly. So, wow.
All right. Well, very good. I appreciate you both coming in and kind of talking about this. I know it's going to be a discussion ongoing, and that members of the school committee who I will also talk to are trying to get feedback from parents, and it's going to be a whole community-wide process. So
it is, because again, whether we keep with 4 elementaries, go to 3, there's all grade configurations that we have to do. We're fortunate that we only have 1 high school and 1 middle school, but that's kind of one of the things that so that sort of limits the conversation right about the high school. It's not like we have 2. So I think that would be, so I think those conversations are upcoming, but we'll have some decisions to make if the high school isn't supported. If we see more of an immediate need at the elementary level, then we may need to shift our priority, because the state only allows you to have 1 priority at a time. So our priority the last 6 or 7 years has been the high school, but we may need to shift to an elementary school if the high school is not supported, and that doesn't make the high school work go away either.
Right. It just changes the approach.
Exactly. So.
All right. Well, a lot to talk about in the future.
And so thank you for covering this. Isn't really an exciting topic sometimes, but it
it's
occupies a lot of our time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll now talk to 2 members of the school committee about their thoughts on the future of Burlington school buildings, what changes are possible, and what kind of feedback they'd like to get from the community. Let's take a look. I am now joined by 2 members of the school committee, Christine Monaco and Chair Martha Simon, to talk about this, school facilities and school buildings. Thank you both for joining me.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
So just in general, just to start off, what kind of discussions have you been having, or what kind of information have you been receiving, just in general about school facilities and school buildings?
Well, overall, we have 3 buildings that have recently been renovated, or not so recently renovated, but are in good shape. We have the new Memorial School. Mm-hmm. We have the new renovations at the Marshall Simons Middle School. And actually, Francis Wyman was renovated. It is in pretty good shape, but it was, I think, 20 years ago. So we're not too concerned. There are ongoing issues that we have to address, but those feel manageable. But we have 3 other buildings that are from the Burlington High Schools from 1971, and Fox Hill and Pine Glen are from the 60s, and they're in dire need of help. So we are very concerned. I don't know if I can go, I could go on. For 8 years, we've applied to the state for matching funds. I forget the exact term they use, but to help us do the renovations at Burlington High School. The heating system, the HVAC system, is so old that if it dies, we would have to rent something external. We can't just replace the boiler.
Right.
And even from before my time, the school committee has committed to, they retubed the boiler, and they redid this and they redid that, but at some point it's going to die, and there isn't a way to just replace the boiler. So we need a whole project to redo the HVAC system in the high school. And also, the other issue is that we have science labs from 1971, and in this day and age, that's just not really educationally acceptable in my perspective. So we have written up a project to renovate the high school that would be about $75 million, and we're hoping that the state would help fund part of it. And as I said, we've applied for 8 years, but have not gotten support. They have told us that the project is a good project and it's necessary, but because the high school was built for 2,000 students and now we have just over 1,000, that criteria of student enrollment is not a pressure on it. So we kind of fall between the categories that the state uses, and we have not been able to get the funding. We have one more proposal in. We are hoping in December to hear that we've been approved, but we're not counting on it. So we do need to move forward with that renovation sooner than later. It's a problem. We have no sprinklers in the high school because it was grandfathered in. We have our air quality, our air ventilation system is not up to code now. Students need to stay awake. They need to be healthy, and if we're going to do a renovation, we need to do it correctly and do it with all of that. So it could cost the town a lot of money. And the town's been very generous with all the other things that we've worked on, and we get some money every year from town meeting to do capital improvements. So we've replaced the roofs, we've replaced the windows, and this is across town, not just at the high school.
Right.
But at some point, it's not enough to just do the fix-up, and we need to do more. So that was my take. And the other, the high school, I think, is the top priority, but 8 years have gone on by, and now we have Fox Hill and Pine Glen, which are from the 60s and really need to be probably replaced, but we're in the process now of talking about that.
Now you said, what was the price tag that you had for the renovation of the high school?
Well, the whole renovation that we've submitted to the state is $75 million. And the town has already, or more, the town's already reserved money in the debt schedule to pay for the town's share if we were to get some state reimbursement for that.
Right.
But if the state doesn't reimburse us, we may have to pay for it, and we may need to go to the town and ask for the money. It's a lot of money, but it's because it's not the cost if we were doing like if we tore down the high school. The school committee, long before I was on it, takes really good care of the buildings. So what we're looking at is a renovation because they call it the bones of the high school is in good shape. And so we can do this renovation. We may have to gut stuff, but we don't have to build a new building. You've probably heard in the news, Billerica High School just opened up. I think it was $175 million. A few years ago, Newton North hit $200 million.
Yeah,
I think
huge project
there's
there.
another high school that's, I don't even remember which one, I heard $300 million. So, I mean, if we had to build a new high school for $150 million, the town would still need to be putting in at least $75 million. So I'm really glad that we've kept up the buildings, but at some point there needs to be this big renovation. And as I mentioned earlier, both the heating and ventilation and the science labs are really big issues for me and concerns for me.
I know the heating thing has been an ongoing project or an ongoing concern for a while now.
Yeah. So.
Anything to add on that basic point or the basic opening?
No, I think Martha covered it well. Just that we have taken really good care of our schools, and it was a call to the residents back in the '60s to build the buildings that we needed, and it's really time for a call to the residents again to do what needs to be done to the upgrading.
Yeah. So you had mentioned, there's different components to it. So obviously HVAC is like the environmental part of it, like how the building works. But you mentioned the labs. Just talk about how, updating facilities or updating buildings can help with, just student engagement, student education. Like what kind of things would you like to see maybe in some of the schools as far as just facilities that would help with learning? Either way.
Okay. The science labs, when I worked at Burlington High School back in the 80s, the science labs were relatively okay, for the 80s. But it's now 2019, and the science labs are totally out of date. If you go and look at the labs in other facilities, and it's just night and day. Even if you go over to the middle school and look at the science labs over there, and it's the difference is just, what you'd expect from 1971 to 2019.
Sure.
So personally, I think that the science labs are very important because the focus educationally as we go forward, there is more and more science that is so important.
Right.
And to not have the kids get a good background in high school with up-to-date modern equipment is a detriment to the education in the town. So I think it's really important, but I don't know if we don't get help from the state, we're probably going to have to do the high school in segments And that's kind of a shame because I don't think the science labs would be the first segment.
Yeah.
You know,
And I feel like, we should, I mean, it would mean smaller chunks, but I feel like we should do the whole project. I could be talked out of that, but
How?
we'd need to ask the town for the money,
Right.
and that's a lot of money. But I think that there are a lot of people in town who agree that the high school is out of date, not just the heating system. The other issue that comes up is if we just do the heating system, say, and don't do the science labs, at some point, and I'm not exactly sure if we, in order to do the heating system, like I said, it's not just replacing the boiler. We have to redo the ventilation, take down the ceilings, and do all of that. And then if it triggers an additional, if we go over a certain percentage, then we have to upgrade to the sprinkler system, and we have to upgrade the ventilation system. It triggers, there's a percentage of a project that would trigger that. And we could do it because it's triggered, or we could do it because at this stage in 2019, we should have sprinklers in our buildings, and we should have air quality that's better for our children, for their health and for their awakeness. We're trying to look at ways to help the students. And because we are a cutting edge high school in many ways in the sciences and STEM areas, and we've got robotics and we've got computer science and all that great stuff. But I feel like it's reasonable to ask the town, is it time to upgrade the science labs, even if we could do a partial project? So we haven't had that whole conversation.
Sure.
We're still kind of hoping that the state will fund our proposal, even though we don't really expect to.
it would be a godsend if the state did fund it,
Yeah.
and we could do it all at once.
Yeah.
Because realistically, to try and do it all at once
Yeah.
without state aid, $80 million,
It's a big chunk.
it's I just don't see it as a realistic opportunity to come up with $80 million when on the heels of that we have 2 elementary schools to do.
Right.
So as much as I would love to
Yeah.
jump on the same bandwagon with Martha as far as doing it all at once, I just feel that if the state does not come through on, what is this, our 8th try,
Yep.
that we're going to have to do one piece and then another piece, and it'll end up breaking it up over time, which again puts in jeopardy the 2 elementary schools that we need to do. So the whole financial piece of this is very difficult.
We're in a tough spot.
Yeah.
And if we had gotten the reimbursement from the state 7 or 8 years ago, then we would only be talking about how to deal with the 2 elementary schools that need fixing
Okay.
or replacing, and then
Yeah.
the conversation would be different. But we were hoping, and so there's been these years where that money has been sitting in the debt schedule, if I understand it correctly, and hasn't been used. So it does end up with this crunch with a lot of expenses, very big projects. The other thing I want to add is that we're talking $75, $80 million to do the full project for the high school, but elementary schools don't cost as much. So the memorial school in 2014, sorry.
I was gonna say.
2014 memorial school was $30 million. And that's a really, really nice facility, and I understand, I wasn't on the school committee then, but it wasn't skimped on, and it's an energy efficient building and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff.
Yes.
There's building a new Fox Hill or a new Pine Glen could be $30 or $40 million, could be up to $50 million, don't know. We're getting some numbers for our ongoing conversation as well.
Right.
So again, it's still a lot of money. If you compare it to what it costs for the new fire station, it's a much different category, exponentially larger.
Sure.
Yeah.
But just like when we built the fire station, we didn't skimp. The firefighters have nice dormitory with single rooms. They have a nice deck on the back. There's a nice barbecue for them. And I think we should be doing that. We should be putting in high quality, up to date, what is needed for the facility. But for a school, there are other requirements. There are different requirements. There's a lot more people in and out. For example,
Right.
a firehouse, a lot of the requirements is space, big enough to put the fire engine in. So they're not really apples and oranges, is what I'm trying to say. But it's a lot of money, and it's good, so we need to have this conversation with the town, and we're beginning it now. How do we manage the cost of these expensive projects?
We did have one conversation last winter, spring, and the town is definitely on board. They're very supportive, but without the state aid, we run into the roadblock of how much can we do and how quickly can we do it.
Sure. Now, has the petition to the state been for the entire renovation project of the high school
Yeah.
the entire time?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, I thought the first couple of years it was just for the HVAC system, but no,
No.
it's been for the whole. This has been a goal for a while now. This,
HVAC is what
$75
gets
Yes.
talked about, because it's the one that if the boilers die,
Right.
we'll have to spend an inordinate amount of money to get backup heating until it can be fixed
Okay.
or
Yeah.
updated.
And the chances of it, I don't want to jinx it, but
Sure.
the 8th year in a row, what's the likelihood that it's going to happen this time? And it as Martha said, there isn't really a category for taking a well-kept older building and fixing it, unless you've got terrible enrollment problems, with too many kids in the building. And we just fall between categories. It's like we shouldn't have taken care of the building, and then we'd be more likely to get money for a new high school.
Right.
We have
Overdid the
twice
upkeep.
gotten to their second round because the proposal was so important to them.
Yes.
Now, there's a little bit of hope if the state legislature follows through on this new Student Improvement Act. It does include more money for the organization. The agency is called the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Right.
They would have a larger pot of money to use, so it's possible that, and I don't know if this year's proposal is going to be included in that new pot of money or not, but there would be more money for more projects, because that's what happens is we might have made it to the list of projects to be funded, but if they run out of money for the first 4, then the 5th one doesn't get funded, and that's what happened to us already.
And you over time, you get dependent on that help from the state. Like when it's an $80 million project, and you say, well, do we do it ourselves, or do we wait for the state to kick in half? And you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, because it's like it's out there if we
Right.
can only get it, but so far that hasn't happened.
And now you mentioned one of the things that could be influence in the future. Changing class sizes, changing demographics. What are you seeing or hearing as far as that? Are classes getting bigger? Are there more students? We have a lot of new housing projects that are opening up or in
Yes,
the
we
in the pipeline.
Well,
What are you
we-
hearing about as far as that might impact the future?
We had a study done a couple of years ago, and this town has a master plan, but the school department has a master plan that did look at enrollment, and they are projecting a 10% increase in the student enrollment over the course of 10 years.
Right.
And so we are seeing the enrollment pressure at the elementary schools. The schools are all full. So there's a separate issue of class size, which is the school committee has committed themselves to keeping class sizes in smaller for K to 2, a little larger for 3 to 5. And this year there were some classrooms where the kids were going from 2nd to 3rd grade and their class sizes were going to
bigger,
increase.
yeah.
So we have some parents who are very concerned about that. Our numbers are still lower than some of the surrounding towns in terms of class sizes. But again, if we want to keep to those lower class sizes, then we need to build new classrooms because we've run out of classrooms, basically. There might be 1 or 2 in the whole school system left. And so that's an issue. And, if people don't care if the class sizes go up, then we can fit more kids into these buildings. But it's been a priority and a value of this school committee
makes a
from
big
long
difference.
before I was on it, to keep those class sizes small. Kids, there's a lot of educational value, as you can imagine, to that. And so then it becomes the enrollment issue, and the enrollment is going up. And Fox Hill's already overcrowded, and I think Pine Glen may be as well. So we do need to be looking at the elementary schools. Now, even though our proposal this year to the state, to the MSBA, is for the high school project, we've already begun a conversation about what do we want to propose to the state that maybe they would partially fund, help us by reimbursement, a new elementary school or two we might want to look at. But there's, so that's what we're having a conversation about now. We've been doing it at our school committee meetings, so it's a public conversation, and we hope people will be listening. And we are going to be looking this fall for more public input. We're going to be putting out requests to parents. We have now on the school website, there's under the district, there's a section on elementary buildings that people can go onto and add their opinion to. There's a little survey there. We have I think we're planning, we haven't finalized anything, but I think we're planning one time this fall to have one of our school committees be, not, the term public hearing is a legal term, so I don't mean it that way, but a chance for people to come and speak and talk about what their concerns are, a public forum. Because we do want to have input from parents, but also from community members to know what people are thinking, because we are weighing the various things. A lot of us are leaning toward, we'd like to keep this kindergarten to 5th grade model with 4 schools that are not too big, but there are some other possibilities that we've been looking at, whether it's building one large school, would that get us more chance to get more state reimbursement? We don't know. We're starting that, we're having that discussion. Do you want to add to that?
One large school.
Yeah,
in order to have it one large school, I think of large as Francis Wyman or Memorial.
Yeah.
This would be double that size.
Right.
This would be close to 1,000 kids in one elementary building, and I just think that's a really bad idea. I would like to know, one of the things that I think we need to find out is whether or not the site at Pine Glen is capable of having a new building on it. That's something I've heard different reports over time over whether or not the building is, or the land. There's some talk about whether it was filled or not filled, and that to me is...
So there's wetland issues, and there's also ledge issues, is what I understand, at the Pine Glen location.
I would really like to know how feasible it is to put a new building at Pine Glen, because in a perfect world, I would put a new building at Pine Glen and a new building at Fox Hill.
Keep the schools where they are.
Yeah, everything. I think they're spread out across town, that they work well. Everybody's pretty much happy with them. I hate to think of going to 1,000 kids in one building. Right.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of.
I don't like that idea either, but I'm trying to be open to what the different ramifications are. And there was a discussion of whether one large building would be financially less expensive, and in order to be respectful of all the financial support from the town, I want to make sure we look at that option. Educationally, I don't like the idea at all, but I'm trying to keep an open mind to those things as well. So we also looked up, the master plan that told us that we had this 10% enrollment projection also looked at the physical plant of all the buildings. And I know you will be speaking also with Dr. Conti and Mr. Cuna, and you may be able to get some more of the details. But just a quick detail that I checked earlier with Mr. Cuna is that the master plan, if we don't replace any buildings, that it would still cost $7.5 million to update Pine Glen School to be where it should be in a physical best scenario. And they were looking at plumbing and security and exteriors and fire and electrical and everything, all the many things. Now those kinds of expenses are the kind that Dr. Conti and Mr. Cuna look at every year and put into our capital warrant articles
Right.
at town meetings. So we do a little bit every year.
I wonder if we could
But-
get state reimbursement on
Yeah.
that. That would be short money.
Yeah, so we haven't looked at all of those options yet, but those are the kinds of conversations we're starting to have at our school committee meetings and with Dr. Conti and Mr. Cuna.
Yeah, I mean, I know every year there are, like there's been recently, I think this past May it was approved for additional like air conditioning
Yeah.
at
Yeah,
Francis
Francis
Wyman,
right.
There's always like maintenance things and,
Right.
and sort of
Just-
incremental ones, but
Right. A couple of years
guess-
ago, we put new roofs on Fox Hill and Pine Glen, I believe.
Correct,
So we
right.
are keeping the buildings up, but there are still these additional costs. The Fox Hill numbers from our master plan, if we didn't replace it, is still $8.5 million. So, these are costs that we have to
fix it.
do, whether or not we put a new building in. And so, and we have to spread them out over time, but at some point, if we want high-quality buildings for our students to be in, I mean, these are our upcoming
Right.
young people, so.
And I know you had mentioned that, in an upcoming meeting, you want to get some more feedback from residents and parents, and that there's a survey on the school website. Have you been hearing anything thus far about, from anybody about their thoughts on this? Has it been
I haven't.
Not a lot.
not a lot yet? So it's sort of the beginning of the discussion.
Yes.
Which is kind of what we wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Kind of have that sort of.
But there aren't a lot of options, really. I mean, we're looking at either fixing those two buildings, replacing those two buildings, or combining those two buildings, or possibly having two separate schools on the Fox Hill site if we can't put one at Pine Glen. So that I have to get used to that one, but the idea of having two different schools on that site, I think, would be better than having one huge school on that site.
Sure.
And they would be possibly connected, or at least have common playgrounds and fields, etc. So I think part of the reason that we haven't had a lot of parental input is there aren't a whole lot of options. Sure, could you make Pine Glen into a kindergarten facility or a fifth grade facility? And I think the school committee has pretty much come to the conclusion that breaking our model that we are so confident
Right.
is the best educational model.
The K-5 model.
Yeah, the K-5 model. That I don't think there's anyone on the committee who's really driving towards that bigger change.
Well, I was looking at it because if it was a less expensive model, I wanted to consider it and consider if it is a decent educational model. But when we looked at that, it would involve a fourth tier of buses, which
Right.
adds $900,000, and it would involve a lot of upgrades because to meet a fifth grade need is not the same as a K-5 need for the size of the gym and those kinds of
Right.
things. It wasn't going to save us any money. So in my
Right.
mind, it's been pretty much put aside, those kinds of things. I also have a concern about building too much on the Fox Hill site, building two buildings. Educationally, I think it could be a possible option, but the Fox Hill site has room for that because it has a lot of woods. And do we want to take down a lot of woods and open space? So that's
Right.
another issue we
Put it
start
on the
getting into.
landlocked parcel.
Well, nobody would want to drive their kids all the way over
well,
there,
no,
right?
you'd have to fly them over. in a
Well, it would
helicopter.
cost another $20 million to build the bridge over.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
it would.
exactly.
I was kidding.
That's
Right. But people do say that, and that's the thing. There are additional costs for some of those things.
Yes.
So,
We have that new walking path at Fox Hill in the woods that the
Yeah.
student
that's right. Yeah.
and his family put together a couple years
That's
ago.
right. Good.
So I guess that's pretty much all the questions that I had. I think, like you said, we're starting a conversation.
Yep.
So there's a lot more coming up. But while I have you, anything additional that you wanted to raise or bring up?
I would just like to thank the town, the selectmen, the town administrator, and town meeting for their support in these various efforts that we have to undertake. I think they've been great, and I think they will continue to be great. And just, we've got some really great citizens in this town. The time has come when I think they're all going to sort of band together and support the changes that need to be made as far as upgrading the high school and upgrading the 2 remaining elementary buildings that haven't been done yet.
Sure.
So I think we're a lucky community to have a low tax base and well, that's probably the wrong word, a low tax
Rate.
yeah,
And a big tax base.
big tax base,
Yeah.
low tax rate. But we're just fortunate to have the support, and we
Yeah.
really do have the support. We all work together very, very well.
Yeah, a lot of residents who understand the value of education. and
Absolutely.
want to make sure the best for the children in this community.
And I
Right.
want to just agree that the town has been incredibly supportive, whether it's town meeting or the administrator
Yeah.
or the Board of Selectmen. And I think people all want what's best for our kids in the schools. And it's hard because there are also people on limited incomes, and we need to be looking at those issues. But as a town, I think people have come through and really supported what the schools have needed in the past, and we're hoping to work together so that it continues in the future. Yeah.
All right, absolutely. So everyone, look out for those upcoming meetings where they want to hear from you and fill out that survey. And well, I'd like to thank you both for coming in and chatting with me about this and
Thanks for
getting
having
this
us.
discussion going.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for
All right.
having us in.
We appreciate you having us. I hope that some people will watch and gain some information.
I think they will. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there you have it, a deep look into Burlington school buildings both today and into the future. I'd like to thank my guests, Superintendent Eric Conti, Director of Operations Bob Kuna, and school committee members Martha Simon and Christine Monaco. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching. We'll be back next month with another edition of BNews In Depth, and we'll see you then.